Let's talk some Miami Hurricane recruiting, and we have to start with five-star offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell because Zuby, Cantwell's coming off the board in 7 days. So there's been a lot of back and forth on who's the favorite. Depending on which message board you go to, you get a different answer. But what's your feelings on Jackson Cantwell as we're a week out?
Yeah, like you said, a lot of different feelings from a lot of different people, and obviously Miami felt like they're in a really good spot for Jackson Campbell heading into that, decision on April 30th. I still feel like they're in a great spot, but him taking that last, second trip to Oregon
Yeah.
makes things a very, very, very interesting. Obviously, he's mentioned that his biggest priority when it comes to his college recruitment is going to be development and where he thinks he can be developed the most. And obviously, last time we talked about Jackson Campbell, I mentioned how Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal have a great track record of developing guys. Have Panay Sewell, who's arguably the best tackle in the NFL right now, and a guy that's projected to be a first-round pick, Francis Maianoa, in that roster right now, and a guy that Jackson Cantwell thinks he can come in and replace and kind of replicate that same success he has. But that trip to Oregon is going to make things very, very interesting. Before he scheduled that visit, I was very, very confident that Miami
Yeah.
would eventually land it, but I still do think Miami's going to in a very good spot for him. But I think that trip to Eugene is going to make things interesting at the end.
Yeah, because if you go back like 7 or 8 days from today, there was, if you read, Oregon writers were nearly conceding Jackson Cantwell to Miami. Now, I know Georgia's also involved. The Georgia mods weren't going as far to say that, but I mean, Oregon, who was the perceived lead, this visit, I mean, what do you make of it? Do you think it's because Oregon is behind and they need to get him on campus, or do you think it's because Jackson Cantwell wants to visit the school he's going to right before his, like, I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, with Jackson being the number one player in the 2026 class, Oregon's not going to go down swinging and probably put everything they have on the table for Jackson Cantwell, saying, "Hey, just come check us out, this one last time before making that decision." And obviously, reading the tea leaves is not too hard to put the things together. He's visiting the school right before he commits, and all this stuff. But like I said, I really do think Miami's in a really good spot. And if it comes down to offensive line development and what he's been preaching this entire time, because if you're being honest, the NIL packages from all these schools are pretty similar with a player of his caliber. So when it comes down to development, all that good stuff, I think Mario Cristobal and those guys kind of present the best opportunity for him to come in and be instant day one impact player. So right now I'm sticking with my gun, saying he ends up being a Miami Hurricane. But if I'm wrong, I'll bite my words and stand on that. But I'm leaning towards the Canes right now.
All right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I felt like this recruitment was leaning toward the Canes, but now we got this Oregon visit this weekend. So we'll see. Sitting here with the Zuby Charles of Cane Sport. Miami fans, we got more intel for you. But first, make sure you guys hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. All right. Let's talk about elite running back Derek Cooper. I thought early on he was one of those South Florida guys that Miami was going to be able to keep home, but now I'm not so sure. What do you think? Can Miami keep home Derek Cooper?
Yeah, it's going to be another fight to keep home Derek Cooper. Obviously, Miami would love to keep that South Florida star in their backyard, but he's visiting Texas this weekend. He has a ton of official visits: Ohio State, Georgia, Auburn, all in the mix. If you remember, he was a 48-hour commit to Georgia, last summer. So there's always that little connection there. But Mark Cristobal and those guys love Derek Cooper. They obviously have a four-star running back Javian Mallory committed in that 2026 class right now, but they've let it be known that they're planning on taking two running backs, and Derek Cooper's at the top, if not their number one running back target remaining in that 2026 class. And they've preached to him, hey, you don't have to go anywhere else to find success. We have the offensive line for you. You saw the success of South Florida running backs like Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lau are having in that offense, and you can be that next guy up. Like you mentioned, a lot of people said, hey, this might be a label for Miami, but other schools across the nation are making it really, really tough. And it's going to be a dogfight to keep Derek Cooper whole, but I think Miami's going to lay it all out for him and, have a good chance at the end to keep him in South Florida.
Yeah, and I think this recruitment will go into the summer, right?
Yeah, I think that this one's not going to be over anytime soon. And even if he, comes up with a decision in the summertime, I think this is going to be one that comes down to signing day, just because the caliber of player he is and how much they value Derek Cooper.
Yeah, and he's a South Florida recruit. What big time South Florida recruitment doesn't come down to signing day? Speaking of South Florida recruits, let's talk about wide receiver Calvin Russell. His recruitment's a little hard to read, but he's taken a bunch of visits. Where do you think Miami stands in all of this?
Yeah, so this is one I don't think Miami fans are gonna like, what I talk about this. And obviously he's a Miami legacy. His mom played, basketball at Miami in the Sports Hall of Fame. But right now I think Syracuse is the leader in my opinion. Coach Fran Brown and those guys have done a great job, recruiting Calvin, not only Calvin, but his mother as well. he was actually at their spring game on April
Mm-hmm.
12th. Second or third time being up there in Syracuse. He was actually there when Miami lost to Syracuse during the season. So Coach Fran Brown, those guys are doing a great job recruiting him, and
They are.
obviously speaking with people at Miami Northwestern and people around that high school program is, hey man, I mean obviously Miami would love to keep him home, but it's going to be a dogfight to do just that, and I think this is going to be one that, like I said about Derek Cooper, comes down to the end. But right now, I think Syracuse and Fran Brown are kind of that team to beat for Calvin Russell, which a lot of Miami fans probably don't want to hear, but got to keep it real. And I think Syracuse is doing their thing right now.
All right. Well, Miami also chasing a couple flips. Auburn linebacker JaMychal Garrett is one of them that Mario Cristobal and his staff are focused on. And Garrett was on campus. I think was it yesterday or he's on campus today. What's the latest with JaMychal Garrett in Miami?
Yeah, JaMychal Garrett's been a Kane's flip target for quite a long time now, even with the old defensive staff. And in January, Miami's new defense coordinator, Corey Heatherman, actually went up to Alabama to go check in on him. And they've been building that relationship ever since. He was supposed to visit early in the spring. Things didn't work out, but he said, hey, I want to check out Miami. They've been recruiting me for the past 2 years. And he's actually on campus, today on Wednesday, and to spend, today and a little bit of tomorrow down there. And this is an absolutely huge visit because he's had a very, very strong interest in Miami, but hasn't been able to get down there and actually see everything that they have to offer. Obviously, committed to Auburn, but he made it clear. He said, hey, Miami's been recruiting me for 2 years, so why not give them a shot and see what they have to offer? So this visit could be absolutely pivotal for the Canes. And he also has that OV set for June 20th, but this trip is going to give him his real first look at Miami and show them, what they have to offer.
All right. Last topic I want to talk about is these big time targets. We see Mario Cristobal and his staff. They are not going to shy away from a big time recruit. So there's two that Miami has hosted in the spring that I want to know. Do you think, and they're probably both long shots at this point, but is Miami going to stay in the recruitment of elite tight end Mark Bowman and number one wide receiver Tristan Keys? Both have been to Coral Gables this spring. So who do you think Miami probably has a better shot at long term?
I would say Tristan Keys right now, but I'll start off with Mark Bowman a little bit. So he's been a guy that Miami staff has been kind of chasing ever since he made that jump to the 2026 class. Sent a few coaching staff members out to Mater Dei to talk to him, and he was actually another guy that was supposed to, come down to Miami early this spring, but just the dates didn't work out. And him going down to Coral Gables was absolutely massive because he even said his dad was like, why are we visiting Miami? Like this isn't a school that you're considering. That his perception of the Canes changed, after spending time down there last week. And he's a guy I think Miami's going to, continue to try to chip away at. But I do think, teams like Georgia, Oregon, and Texas are kind of really, really up in front of that. So we'll see if Miami can kind of close that gap and, maybe get him on official vision. But Tristan Keys has been a guy that's been down to Miami twice this spring, most recently for the spring game, had the chance to hang out with not only the coaching staff, but the players and, fellow recruits, throughout that weekend. And obviously he has an interest in Miami. LSU's the team to beat right now that he's committed to. But Coach Kevin Beard and all those guys down there absolutely love Tristan Keys. He has that OV set with Miami that he's still going to take in the summer, which is a very, very positive sign. And, if they're able to get him down on campus, during the fall as well, too, I think that'd be absolutely massive. But, out of those two top pass catchers, I do think Miami's in a better position with Tristan Keys over Mark Bowman at the moment.
Great stuff there, Zuby. All right, Miami fans, talk to us. How are we feeling on Jackson Cantwell? I don't know what to think. You guys help us do the science. What does this Oregon visit mean? What was all the smoke with Miami about a week ago? Let us know. Where does Jackson Cantwell end up?